Mijas. Some people think marriage is about love and partnership. Look, I thought it was about finding someone who could give me and my son the life we deserved. When I married Chandler 10 years ago, I knew exactly what I was getting. A man who would step up and handle everything Lucas needed, and he did without question, without complaint. Private school tuition, orthodontic work, summer camps, you name it. The man opened his wallet like it was his job. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing about real relationship situations, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. I'm Peyton. I'm 43, and I married Chandler when Lucas was 7. His biological father had been completely absent since Lucas was a toddler. No calls, no support, just gone. So when this generous, stable man came into our lives willing to play daddy, I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Chandler was methodical about everything, almost obsessively so. He'd research the best schools, compare insurance plans, track every expense in those little notebooks he kept. Some women might find that controlling, but I found it useful. The truth is, I encouraged his generosity because it meant I could keep my own money separate. Why should I drain my savings when he was so eager to provide? I had my own nest egg to protect. And if Chandler wanted to play the hero, who was I to stop him? Whenever he'd start questioning some expense, and he rarely did, I'd bring up Lucas's absent father. He's never had a real dad, I'd say, watching Chandler's face soften with guilt. You're all he has. It worked every time. For Lucas's 16th birthday, Chandler bought him a 1968 Ford Mustang. Not just bought it, spent months restoring the thing in our garage, coming home from work with grease under his fingernails, talking excitedly about carburetors and whatever else. Lucas would nod along, but I could tell he was just tolerating Chandler's enthusiasm. Still, the car was gorgeous when they finished, and Lucas loved showing it off to his friends. The college fund was another one of Chandler's projects. He'd opened some investment account the year we married and had been putting away money from every paycheck for a decade. $85,000, all earmarked for Lucas's education. I never contributed to it. Why would I when Chandler was handling it? But I definitely had opinions about where Lucas should go to school and what kind of lifestyle that money should provide. Between us, I started noticing Chandler's intensity about everything was getting on my nerves. The way he'd obsess over Lucas's grades, the lectures about responsibility, the constant checking in about homework. I mean, Lucas was a teenager. Of course he was going to slack off sometimes. But Chandler would get this tight look on his face whenever Lucas didn't meet his expectations, like he was personally offended by normal teenage behavior. You're being too hard on him, I'd tell Chandler when he'd try to have one of his serious talks with Lucas. He's just a kid. He's 17, Peyton. He needs to understand consequences. You're stressing me out with all this pressure, I'd say, and usually that would make him back off. Chandler hated when I got upset, especially if I started tearing up. He'd immediately shift into comfort mode, apologizing for being too intense. It was actually pretty easy to manage him once I figured out his triggers. But Lucas was getting more distant, more dismissive. He'd talk about the Mustang like he'd earned it, somehow making plans for college, like the money was just his birthright. I didn't see the problem. Wasn't that the point? To give your kids a better life than you had, but Chandler kept pushing about grades and attitude, and I kept having to smooth things over. The breaking point came on a Thursday, when Lucas's report card arrived. 2 failing grades, not because he couldn't do the work, but because he wasn't showing up or turning in assignments. I watched from the kitchen as Chandler went to Lucas's room to talk to him about it. "Billy, we need to talk about these grades," I heard Chandler say through the door. "This isn't going to cut it for the universities you've been looking at." Lucas barely looked up from his phone. "Whatever, it'll be fine." "It won't be fine. Your teachers are saying you're skipping classes. What's going on?" I could hear the frustration building in Chandler's voice, that tight control he always tried to maintain. Lucas finally looked at him, and even from the kitchen, I could sense the tension. "Haktikas, why do you even care? It's not like you're my real dad." My stomach dropped a little. Lucas had said variations of this before, usually when he was angry about some rule or restriction. But something felt different this time. Chandler's voice stayed steady. "I care because I love you, and I want you to have a good future." Then Lucas stood up, and I heard the words that would change everything. No, you don't. You love playing the hero. Look, stop trying to be my dad. You're just the guy who pays for things. The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, waiting for Chandler's usual patient response, his attempt to reason with Lucas, to explain his feelings. Instead, I heard something I'd never heard before, a cold, calm voice that made my skin prickle. Understood, Chandler said quietly. Then he walked out of Lucas's room and right past me in the kitchen without a word. His face wasn't angry or hurt. It was blank, like someone had just flipped a switch. I followed him to our bedroom. He's just upset about his grades, I started. You know how teenagers get when they're stressed. He didn't mean it. Chandler was sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at nothing. He meant it. Come on, you're overreacting. Lucas loves you. He's just going through a phase. Peyton, he just told me exactly what he thinks of me. I'm going to take him at his word. Something in his tone made me nervous. What's that supposed to mean? But Chandler just shook his head and went to take a shower. He didn't speak to Lucas for the rest of the evening, which wasn't unusual after one of their conflicts. I figured he'd cool off and things would go back to normal by morning. I was wrong. The next morning, Chandler worked from home, which he sometimes did on Fridays. But instead of his usual routine of checking emails and taking calls, he spent the morning making phone calls I couldn't quite hear from the kitchen. Around lunchtime, he disappeared into the garage with his camera, taking pictures of the Mustang from every angle. What are you doing? I asked when he came back inside. Listing it for sale? He said matter-of-factly. I laughed. Very funny. Lucas will apologize, you know he will. I'm asking $25,000 should get some decent interest. The casual way he said it made my blood freeze. Chandler, you can't be serious. I'm also liquidating the college fund. The mortgage company should have the payoff statement ready by Monday. What mortgage payoff? What are you talking about? He looked at me like I was slow. I'm paying off our mortgage with the money from Lucas's college account. It seems like a better investment than funding the education of someone who sees me as an ATM. You can't do that. That money is for Lucas's future. That money came from my paychecks from my separate account. Lucas made it very clear what my role is in this family. I'm the guy who pays for things. Well, I've paid enough. I felt panic rising in my chest. This is insane. You're going to destroy his life over something he said when he was upset. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just closing my account. The way he said it, so calm and final, terrified me. This wasn't the Chandler I knew, the one who could be reasoned with, who hated conflict, who always backed down when I got emotional. This was someone else entirely. Chandler, please, think about what you're doing. Lucas needs that money for college. He needs the car for school and work. You can't just take it all away. I'm not taking anything away. It was never his to begin with. I tried tears next, the tactic that had always worked before. This is our family. You're supposed to love him unconditionally. How can you be so cruel? For just a moment, his expression softened and I thought I had him. Then his face hardened again. I did love him unconditionally, but love has to go both ways. Right now, this feels like a toll road, where I'm the only one paying. That weekend, I kept waiting for him to change his mind. Lucas came downstairs Saturday morning, jingling the car keys like always. I'm taking the car. Need some gas money, he said to Chandler, not even looking at him. That's not possible, Chandler replied calmly. Why not? Because it's for sale. I have someone coming to look at it this afternoon. The silence was crushing. I watched Lucas's face go from confusion to disbelief to panic. What, it's my car, It's my car, Lucas, and I'm selling it. I jumped up from the couch. Idar, Chandler? What is this? You're going to sell his car to punish him. It's not punishment, Peyton. It's a financial decision. Speaking of which, the college fund has been liquidated. I'm using it to pay off the mortgage. The screaming started then. Lucas went from rage to pleading in seconds. But it's my car. You gave it to me. What am I supposed to tell my friends? You could tell them the truth, Chandler suggested. The guy who paid for it decided to sell it. Lucas stormed off, and I followed Chandler into the kitchen, my voice shaking with fury. This is our son, Chandler. You're supposed to love him unconditionally. I did, he said, and something in his voice made me stop yelling. But apparently that wasn't enough. For the first week, I thought he was bluffing, some elaborate lesson to make Lucas appreciate what he had. But then serious buyers started calling about the car. Chandler would casually mention them at dinner. Got an offer for $15,000 today. Declined. Someone wanted to trade it for a jet ski. Told them no thanks. Lucas would go pale every time, but he was still acting like he didn't care, like this was all beneath him. I kept giving Chandler the silent treatment, waiting for him to crack and apologize. Instead, he seemed more relaxed than he'd been in months. Then a man named Derek contacted Chandler about the car. He wanted a professional inspection, which took several days to arrange. I watched Lucas standing at the window as some mechanic went over his car with a clipboard, his face no longer showing anger, but genuine fear. After the inspection came back clean, Derek made an offer of $23,500. Chandler accepted, and they signed papers. It was all very businesslike, very final. This is really happening, I said to Chandler that night. You're actually going to destroy his future over one stupid comment. His future isn't destroyed, Peyton. It's just going to look different than what he expected. Call Derek back. We can fix this. Lucas will apologize. Just tell me you'll stop this. The purchase agreement is signed. The college fund money cleared yesterday and transfers to the mortgage company on Monday. He wasn't being cruel or vindictive. He was just stating facts. But to me, those facts felt like cruelty. The day Derek came for the car was surreal. Lucas watched from his bedroom window as this stranger drove away with what he'd thought was his Mustang. The sound of that engine fading down our street felt like the end of something. 3 days later, the mortgage payoff confirmation arrived in the mail. Chandler left it on the kitchen counter where I couldn't miss it. Balance 0. I didn't speak to him for 3 days after that. That's when I got desperate. I called Chandler's boss, framing my concerns as worry about his mental state. He's been acting erratically, I explained, draining savings accounts, making impulsive decisions. I'm worried about his stability. The plan backfired spectacularly. Apparently, Chandler had already given his boss a heads up about family issues that might get messy. When his boss mentioned my call, Chandler's reaction wasn't anger, it was disappointment. You tried to sabotage my job, Hiwahai said that evening. The source of the money you feel so entitled to. I was worried about you, Majindam. You were worried about your lifestyle. Meanwhile, Lucas was facing reality for the first time in his life. The phone bill came due, and Chandler texted him a screenshot of his $95 portion. Lucas's response was predictably outraged, but Chandler just replied that his role had been clarified. He was no longer the guy who paid for things. Lucas spent 2 weeks applying to what he considered good jobs, coffee shops, bookstores. When those didn't pan out, he reluctantly started applying to fast food places and big box stores. Finally, he came home wearing the ugliest uniform I'd ever seen, sickly yellow and brown polyester with a matching visor. He smelled like fried chicken and wouldn't make eye contact with either of us. The counseling we tried was a disaster. I kept explaining that Chandler was overreacting to normal teenage behavior, while he calmly laid out years of disrespect and entitlement that I'd enabled. The therapist seemed to side with him, which made me even more frustrated. You're both ganging up on me, I said during one particularly awful session. I'm the one trying to hold this family together. By undermining every boundary I've tried to set, Chandler asked. By protecting my son from your unrealistic expectations? Your son, Chandler repeated quietly. That says everything. The marriage counselor suggested we separate to get some perspective. I agreed, thinking time apart would make Chandler realize what he was losing. Instead, it seemed to confirm what he already knew. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. I'd assumed we'd split everything 50-50, including the now paid-off house. My father had assured me I'd take him to the cleaners. But when I met with my lawyer, she explained something called reimbursement rights. Since Chandler had used his separate funds to pay off the mortgage, he had a legal claim to that money off the top before any remaining equity was divided. When the house sold, the first check for $76,450 went directly to Chandler. The remaining equity was split between us, leaving me with less than a quarter of what I had expected. This can't be right, I told my lawyer. It's completely legal. He protected his separate property interest. Niemand ansehen. I moved in with my parents, John and Kinsley, who had been sending Chandler angry texts about ruining Lucas's future. They welcomed us with open arms at first, but the reality of supporting 2 additional adults quickly wore thin. Lucas lasted 2 months at the chicken place before getting fired for his attitude. He tried stocking shelves at a big box store overnight, but quit after 6 weeks, complaining it was too hard. Now 18 and a high school graduate with a terrible GPA, he was living in my parents' spare room, going nowhere fast. The financial pressure on my parents created constant tension. They'd expected to help temporarily while I got back on my feet, not support me and Lucas indefinitely. I tried dating, but what did I have to offer? No career, no savings, no independence. Men my age were looking for partners, not projects. 2 years after the divorce was final, I saw Chandler at a local grocery store. He looked good, healthier, more relaxed, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He was alone buying ingredients for what looked like an elaborate dinner, whistling softly to himself. When he noticed me, he nodded politely and continued shopping. No anger, no drama, just indifference. It was worse than hatred. I wanted to approach him to say something, but what was there to say? That I was sorry, that I'd learned my lesson. The truth was, I wasn't sorry. I was angry. Angry at him for being so vindictive, angry at Lucas for being so ungrateful, angry at my parents for not being more supportive, angry at the whole situation. Look, maybe I enabled Lucas sometimes. Maybe I should have backed Chandler up more when he tried to set boundaries. But taking away a kid's car and college fund, that's not teaching a lesson. That's destroying a future out of spite. Lucas barely speaks to me now. He blames me for not fighting harder to keep Chandler's support, for not being able to provide the life he'd grown accustomed to. My parents are tired of both of us making passive-aggressive comments about finding jobs and getting our lives together. Meanwhile, Chandler has moved on completely. I heard through mutual friends that he's doing well, focusing on himself, saving for retirement. He bought some expensive mountain bike and spends weekends exploring trails. He even adopted a dog. Between us, I think he used Lucas's comment as an excuse to blow up our family. He was looking for a way out and jumped on the first opportunity. Because what kind of man destroys a teenager's future over words said in anger? What kind of person holds a grudge against a kid who was just acting like a kid? I'm not saying I was perfect. I'm not saying I handled everything right. But I was trying to protect my son from a man who demanded gratitude for every dollar he spent, who kept score of every kindness like he was running a business instead of a family. The truth is, some people just can't handle the reality of blended families. They want appreciation and recognition for every sacrifice, instead of understanding that love isn't supposed to be transactional. Chandler could never just be Lucas's stepdad. He had to be the hero of the story. And when Lucas finally called him out on it, when my son had the courage to tell him the truth about what his generosity really looked like, Chandler couldn't handle it. So he took his ball and went home, leaving the rest of us to deal with the wreckage. I mean, what did he expect, that Lucas would spend the rest of his life bowing down in gratitude? That's not how kids work. They take what you give them because that's what parents do. They provide. You don't get a medal for doing what you're supposed to do. But here I am 2 years later, still dealing with the consequences of his tantrum, still trying to rebuild what he tore down, still explaining to people why my marriage fell apart, why my son had to give up his dreams, why everything went to hell so fast. The worst part is how everyone acts like Chandler was justified, like Lucas somehow deserved to have his future destroyed over teenage attitude, like I somehow deserved to lose my home and my security over family drama. I guess some people just can't handle the messy reality of real families. They want everything neat and grateful and perfect. And when it's not, they'd rather burn it all down than do the actual work of being a parent. So here I am, starting over at 45, living with my parents like I'm 20, again watching my son struggle with jobs He's overqualified for all because my ex-husband couldn't handle being told the truth about his role in our family. But I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending that what he did was anything other than cruel and vindictive. And someday, when Lucas gets his life together, despite everything Chandler took from him, we'll both know who the real hero of this story was. It wasn't the guy who paid for things. It was the woman who kept fighting for her family, even when everyone else gave up.